Welcome every morning. Good afternoon, since it's already noon. I'm Lourdes Solera, chair of the AI Florida Women in Architecture Group. And in case you're wondering, I'm at a school, so I am outside in the wind. So thank you for joining our November slash October Women Luncheon Zoom. Today's speaker will be Marilise Nepomeci, FAIA. She's a professor of architecture and associate dean at Florida International University College of Communication, Architecture, and the Arts. Her work has received numerous professional and academic awards, both nationally and internationally. She's done exhibitions in wide publications. She was the author of AI Miami's AI Guide to Miami, Building Paradise, and Architectural Guide to the Magic City. She's also served as a member of the National Accreditation Board, Council of Education. She's done all kinds of things. And most importantly, she's our most recent AI Florida Gold Medal winner for this year. So with that, I will give you Marilise Nepomeci, FAIA.
Thank you, Lourdes, and thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate this. Let me share my screen if I can do that. And maybe have a little bit of conversation about, not so much about me, but mostly about the sort of state of the profession. This was the first slide of my materials for the gold medal. And I don't necessarily, I'm not going to go through most of this, except to say that I have, as Lourdes says, been very fortunate to have an opportunity to make a difference, both in education, the education of architects for the profession, and in the profession itself. I just want to begin with thanking Lourdes and AI Florida's Women in Architecture Group for the invitation to speak. Lourdes asked me to speak about anything that I wanted, which is one of those, scary blank white piece of paper moments. But I thought I would spend the time in speaking to you about the sort of the state of our profession, hold up a mirror to architecture as a next generation of architects is going to see it, and as those of you who are in the current generation have very likely know it. I'd say that this is our group at Florida International University. As Lourdes says, I'm a professor there. I have been for most of my academic career, which now spans 2.5 decades. It's a good long time. And I'll tell you that my path in the academy and in practice has been probably like many of yours, right? Neither direct nor necessarily easy. I'd say that in many ways, I'm a bit of a statistical demographic anomaly, probably also true of many of the people in the Zoom room. I'm a Cuban woman, I'm a minority, I'm a licensed professional, I'm the principal of my own, in my case, very small practice. I'm a fellow of the Institute, a tenured full professor, and an academic administrator who has undertaken a fair amount of professional service at national, international, regional, and local levels, primarily in support of architecture education. I am, however, the fortunate and an incredibly grateful beneficiary of generous mentors, many of them over the years, gracious and gifted, extraordinary colleagues, and also the beneficiary of a path that was broken for me by the many extraordinary women and minorities who have come to the profession before me. I thought it would be helpful to begin by looking at us, at least in my small corner of the universe, and by looking at data, holding up a mirror to who we are and where we are, and in that context is speaking a little bit about the university. The data that I'm going to be sharing with you comes from a series of very well-respected sources, the ACSA, which is the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture. It's the kind of AIA for architecture educators. And it's an organization of which I was privileged to serve as president a few years back. The NAAB, which is the National Architectural Accreditation Board, it is the institution that ensures that architecture education across all of the institutions in the United States is delivered in a way that prepares young architects to enter the profession. And as Lourdes says, I've been fortunate and privileged to have been the president of that national organization as well. Some of the data comes from the AIA, an organization we all know well as from NCARB, the National Council for Architecture Registration Boards. Some of it also from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the National Center for Education Studies. So when you look at it with me, I think you'll see that while we've made a lot of changes over the years, there's probably still a lot of work to be done before the profession that we're in looks like who we are as a population, right? We, the United States, probably the world at this point, is majority women, in more than 50%. And our profession doesn't look like that, not yet. We need, although we have more and more women in our schools, and if you're looking at this photograph, chances are you've noticed that a lot of those smiling faces at the end of the first year of architecture school are young women, and we are, as probably see here, 68% female in the School of Architecture at FIU, and 89% non-white minority, which is actually quite remarkable and not the case everywhere in the United States. Nonetheless, we continue nationwide to need more role models because it's really hard to be what you can't see. We need more women and we need more minority students of architecture because they are the pipeline to the profession that we know. We need more minority and women faculty in our architecture schools. We need more women and minorities in positions of leadership, both in the profession and in the academy. We need more women and minorities who are fully licensed architects because a lot of those who graduate from us never complete licensure. And again, you know that because it's your experience. We need more who are guest lecturers and speakers who are standing at the front of our lecture halls and in this case in Zoom rooms. Thank you very much again. More who are curators and exhibitors in the galleries and museums and the biennales that all of you will visit and have visited over the years. More who are authors of books that students are assigned to read and the general public can access, especially the non-professional public, because we have to introduce non-architects to the value of our work as architects and designers. We need more women who are designers of the exemplary buildings and the sites that we visit and we study, who are at the forefront of grant-funded research and technological advancement for our profession and for our discipline. And we need more who are singled out for the excellence of their accomplishments, who are awarded the absolute top accolades in our discipline and our profession. As in today, thank you again, our gold medal. So why, right? Why a group like Women in Architecture, and why do we need more women and more minorities in all of these positions? Mostly for a number of reasons, and let me offer a couple. I would say, number one, because our lived experiences inevitably color our perspective and our approach to our work. It's true of everyone. A tall person sees the world differently than a short one, and a young one sees it differently than an older one. And women see it differently than men, and minorities tend to see it from the perspective of their own experience. Architects, right? Those of us who, with the famously utopian gene, who are always seeking ways to design and bring to fruition a better world, we train to design the settings in which everyone lives out their lives. And because ideally we want those settings to reflect and ultimately bring out the best in absolutely all of us. So I will say, and if you're looking at our demographics and have been for a little while, FIU is not a garden variety architecture school. We don't have a bachelor's. We only have the MArch. A student will enter as a freshman and graduate with a master's degree in architecture. Cost to students, if they're in-state, is $6,500 a year for undergraduate studies and $8,200 a year for the graduate part of their education. And in the 175 credits that you have to study at FIU to become a licensed architect, I would say that maybe 2/3 of that is at the graduate tuition level, and 1/3 of that is at the undergraduate, give or take a little bit. The full degree for the MArch in architecture at FIU, and for that matter, the other state university system degree programs, and this is in-state tuition and fees, will cost less than a single year in many private programs around the US and really around the world. Most students, but not all, graduate with manageable costs and without debt. Which is something that we're very proud of. But again, take a look at what we look like. This is our Department of Architecture. The other was the school, and the school at FIU includes a Department of Landscape Architecture and a Department of Interior Architecture. We are a majority minority institution and a Hispanic serving one. I will say that our faculty numbers don't reflect our student numbers. We are 35% female today and 45% non-minority white. It's not as diverse as our population, and it's something that we are working hard to correct. But I will say that the world, if you are female and if you are a minority of any sort, probably looks a little bit like this, right? More acute if at the same time you are more than one of those, a woman perhaps, and also a demographic minority or any other minority, religious, cultural, physical, economic, cognitive. And that is something that we need to correct. This is as of January 2020, but what I'm going to tell you is what's more up to date. And you can see, and this is Bureau of Labor Statistics information. If this plan says that the US population, which is what you see at the bottom, is just over 50% women, then, and post-secondary students are about 55% women, you can see that these percentages of women reduce dramatically as you move through all of these different levels of accomplishment. They are beginning AXPs, NAB accredited degrees, NAB accredited architecture students, the holders of NCARB records, AIA. Those who complete the ARE are increasingly, we're getting closer to 50%, but we're still just at about 40. Those numbers get less as you look at members of the AIA, and I know we're working hard to grow those numbers. Faculty who have made it into the academy on the full-time level and are working towards tenure, that's an even smaller percentage. People who graduate with architecture degrees at any level, directors and chairs of schools, you're already at well under 30%. Licensed AIA members, even smaller percentage of our population, certificate holders, approximately the same as those, but then you get the ACSA distinguished professors and you're under 20% women. AXP supervisors who are women are under 10%, something that the profession can really do something about. Pritzker Prize winners are an even smaller percentage, and AIA gold medalists almost non-existent. For a profession that has as many women as it can have, we have a ways to go. We look at how women do in architecture over time. This tracks it over a considerable period, beginning just before 1985, continuing to 2020. The update to 2023, which is where we are, is really not much different. And you can see that architecture's highest honors are at under 20%. The number of working architects has spiked to a big 25%. We've got, again, a ways to go, and it's come back down again. But the numbers of students who are in NAB accredited programs and who have earned NAB accredited degrees is climbing up to the 50%, which means to me that we are poised to make a significant difference in this area down here. Another kind of review of where we are in terms of the biggest honors, the highest honors of our profession. And you look at distinguished professors of the ACSA, the Topaz Medallion, which is jointly awarded by the American Institute of Architects and the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture. The very first Black woman was awarded that recognition this past year, Dr. Sharon Sutton. She said that it took 20 years for her application to be reviewed and accepted. So something for you, for all of us, to be thinking about. Among Pritzker Prize winners, there are women, and there have been some changes in recent years. More of them are joint partnerships, male and female, but Farrell and McNamara in 2020 jointly won, two women in practice in Ireland jointly won the Pritzker in 2020. The AIA gold medal has yet to be won by a woman practicing alone. Again, we've got some work to do. One of the interesting issues to note is what you see on the screen right now. Women are more likely than men to research in areas of interiors, of health and aging, of materials, healthy materials in which to work and live and out of which to build, participatory design, community engagement, and issues of climate and community resilience. And these are arguably the key issues of our time. We need those areas of interest at the forefront of our profession because our population is aging, because we live our lives in interiors, because we build out of metal, out of materials that are critical to everything that we do, and because we need to engage with our communities in order to build in ways that are both resilient and reflexive of the needs of others. With respect to that, and in these areas of research, something to note is that male and female architecture faculty are awarded tenure at disproportionate rates, only 40% of women to 55% of men, and that associate degree programs, which is the place where most architecture students who are trying to gain their professional training and education in the most cost-effective way begin, are those that reward even fewer faculty members. Something to look at. Look at leadership levels, and you can see that as of 2020, and I can tell you that of 2024, it's not much different. Although Puerto Rico is a shining example of some difference, and areas of Louisiana, but it's the only one. Everywhere else, right? Males are the dominant. And that you're looking at 3 out of every 10 deans, 7 out of 20 assistant or associate deans, 1 out of every 3 department heads, 6 out of every 19 directors and chairs. At FIU, I was the inaugural director of our professional program in architecture. There hasn't been a woman in that role since. I was also the first woman to be tenured in our Department of Architecture. Others, I'm happy to report, have come since me. And certainly one of 2 full professors who are women in my department, and the first distinguished professor. Again, others of my generation and younger need to be coming to take up that slack. You can look at total full-time faculty. These are the schools where our students learn, where you probably, some of you on the screen are probably learning the percentage of minorities doesn't reach 20%. And it was 2015, but is equally true today. I checked. This is the sum of all the different minorities that this adds up to: Asians, Latinos, Blacks, International, American Indian, and Pacific Islander. Again, over 80% of our faculty are neither women nor minorities. And they move through ranks differently. There are far fewer in the academic ranks. Assistant to associate professors, full professors are, again, majority male. If this is the number of total females who are full professors, this is the number of males. So you can understand how we're reading that. One daunting fact, and again, unfortunately, after 2016, this remains the case. So 6 years later, this is still true. Many of our minority students are graduating with tremendous levels of debt. Again, not typically at FIU, but in many places around the country. And you see that the highest level of debt are female, Black, MARC students, right, who will graduate from many private institutions with well over $100,000 in debt by the time they finish their graduate studies. Black men who are pursuing graduate studies in architecture education graduate with almost $100,000 of debt. And you see further on down, female Asian or East Indian and male Asian or East Indians in all age groups. That's something to it tells us that those of us who are in higher education have work to do to make education more affordable. And then the profession needs to be able to help these people who aspire to make a career and a future in our discipline and in our profession, pay them well enough to be able to live productive and reasonable lives. This data here comes from NCARB, and some of this education, some of this information, for better or for worse, again, hasn't changed. If those of you who are involved with the Florida licensing board or with NCARB on any level, and I'm sure many of you are, will know that NCARB publishes a wonderful publication called NCARB by the Numbers every year. And NCARB by the Numbers goes through a whole series of data points with respect to this, but things to begin to look at as we look at the state of our profession. It continues to take almost 4.5 years to finish AXP, the experience program. Most students, most young persons are no longer students, begin at the age of 25 and finish at almost 30 years of age, this AXP program. And that's without counting having to take and pass the ARE, the Architecture Registration Examination. It takes most over 2 years, between 2 and 3 years, to finish the exam. Some, increasingly more candidates are overlapping AXP and ARE. It used to be that NCARB required that you finish one before beginning the other. But it is still 29-year-olds is the age that they begin testing, which means that the entire trajectory, right, of becoming a licensed architect is taking 12.7 years to complete, and that's still true today. That's a long time, right, from the time you begin on this journey to the time you're actually a fully vetted member of our profession. It takes probably too long, much longer than in many other professions. For most of ARE and AXP completers, the average age is 32.5 years. That's not young, and that's a long time to be in the starting stages. You're earning money, absolutely. You're working to pay down your debt, absolutely. You're growing in stature and experience in the profession, but it takes a long time to do what we're doing. IPAL is one way that NCARB has made it possible for schools in partnership with industry to make it faster and easier for students to begin, and it's a program, and there are 25 IPAL programs. FIU has a successful one that I spearheaded. There's a brilliantly successful one at the University of Florida, based in Orlando. But these are opportunities for students to be in school while at the same time earning AXP credits and having access to the ARE. It, at its best, it makes the process of getting to licensure, it cuts it down by half. You can graduate having your license in hand. A little bit more statistics with respect to the profession. Nearly 2 in 5 new architects are women. That's good. These are the brand new, they finished AXP, they've taken the ARE, and over half of NCARB record holders are women and people of color, which is, again, remarkable. You can open a record once you finished high school. So people are starting them earlier, and we are capitalizing on the diversity of our student population to hopefully create an ever broader pipeline to the profession. But there is a ways to go. In the profession, African Americans are 5% less likely than their white peers in agreeing that finding a supportive firm is easy, that finding mentors is easy, and women are still twice as likely as men to stop pursuing licensure after taking at least one ARE division. Those of you who are full-time in the profession well after the academy has finished its full-time engagement with young women and young men, please continue to encourage those of you hire to stay on the path. It's critical. Some data, and this is hard to see, but let me summarize that. I'll tell you that as of today, Hispanics or Latin architects make up 17% of architecture graduates in the United States, but only 8.7% of architecture faculty, only 8.5% of architecture professionals, maybe not in Florida and certainly not in South Florida, but nationwide. Latin and Hispanics are only 6% of major award recipients. And if that sounds daunting, Black or African American have an even harder time, right? Black men represent under 2% of licensed architects in the United States, and Black women constitute only 20% of that small number, or 0.4%. That's a minuscule percentage. Black students nationwide are only 5% of the student population of architecture students. And Black women architecture students are 1/3, less than 2% of that small number. And they earn just under 2% of the total number of architecture degrees awarded nationwide. Fewer than 1% of major architecture medals are awarded and conferred on Black professionals, male and female. In recent years, 1 gold medal, 1 topaz, 4 distinguished professors, and 1 Pritzker, Mr. Correa, last year. And of that group, only 2 are Black women. So I like to show this. I don't know whether you've seen it before. If you've been active in women in architecture groups, you may have seen this a little before the COVID pandemic shut all of us down and changed our world a little bit. AIA San Francisco's Women in Architecture group commissioned a study, widest ever, of the profession. And what you see is a sort of interesting graphic that represents what that study revealed about the 14,000 or more than 14,000 respondents. And it sort of tracked them. I mean, people took it at many ages, but it tracked various sort of pinch points or decision points in the career of an architect. You see on the far left, right, the moment that they graduate from school. And it's approximately 50-50, right? Half women and half men, including, separate categories so that you can track them from this particular group: Asian women and Asian men, Hispanic males, Black males and women, and multiracial males and women. You can see that the first thing after graduation for the vast majority is to work in a firm, right? Some work in areas that the survey called beyond architecture, which meant that they were taking their education and doing something other than an architecture career with it. And some went into a kind of sole practice, not yet licensed, obviously, but something that was perhaps entrepreneurial, related to design, not in the beyond architecture category, but not practicing for a firm led by licensed professionals. Some years out of that, you notice the percentage that is licensed, right? Most of those who worked in a firm, male and female, decide to become licensed practitioners, but a few decide not to take that route. And there, interestingly, you see the majority of the minority candidates, about half of the women, and actually a smaller percentage of the men in the group choose not to become licensed. Having become licensed, another set of life choices: having no children, being the main caregiver of a child, sharing that care with a partner, being the secondary, not primary caregiver, or at this point that they took the survey, having adult children that perhaps require less, if any, care. And you see the results reflected, right, in the numbers of places where individuals are able to live out their professional lives. As principals, the majority, as you can see, are men. Most of those who answered the survey had adult children or secondary caregivers or shared care. Almost none was the main caregiver, and almost all of them, as you would imagine, if they're principals, are licensed. There are always exceptions to that as well. You can be the principal of a firm without being licensed, but that's the minority. Associates in the firm, junior associates, senior associates, etc. Again, closer to 50-50, but majority male. Licensed architects who don't yet reach the associate level, you can see that there is closer parity there. Designers, not necessarily licensed professionals. Here, the majority are women, and almost all of the minority women find themselves here, and many of the minority men. And of those who choose an alternative career that's really not related to architecture, you see those there. And again, many of them not parents who have primary care of children, not all of them, many of them not licensed. It is an interesting picture of our profession and that what might happen over time. Let's see. So what are we doing about all of this at FIU? I wanted to share with you something about some of the colleagues that we have hired and retained over the years, so that we do some of what I think needs doing, right? Putting people at the front of the room and at the head of projects and at the head of initiatives that can be role models for students. This is how you nurture leadership and how you nurture engagement. So one of my colleagues, Shaheen Basig, is the director of technology research development in our college. She is a PhD. She is a professional architect. She's an urban planner. She's also an engineer. And she leads our robotics and digital fabrication lab. Another recent hire, brilliant colleague, Melissa Silva, a professional licensed architect in both the United States and in Venezuela. She is an associate professor in our architecture program, the principal and founder of Enlace Arquitectura in Caracas. who does phenomenal work both in professional practice, and you see on the screen one of her projects nominated for an MCHAP Architecture of the Americas Excellence Award, but also a lot of community engaged work in the barrios of Caracas. A lot of beautiful public project work and interesting polemic about creating public spaces that are available and accessible to all. My colleague Maddie Gannon is a research associate, research fellow in our robotics and digital fabrication lab. Maddie dances with robots, as you can see on the screen. She is an alum of FIU's program, of our MArch program, who went on to get the PhD at Carnegie Mellon, and who leads exceptional practices at the threshold between technology and art in the context of the built environment. My colleague Biana Bogosian recently completed her PhD and has a post-professional degree from Columbia as well as a BArch. She is a professor of architectural technology and associate director of the RDF lab. She does wonderful urban design projects that use the sensor technology and other mechanisms for tracking data to understand how we use and live in our cities, and what might be better ways to make them increasingly resilient and responsive to the needs of our time. Some of you may know my colleague Claudia Bush, who is associate teaching professor of architecture and design principal at Barenblum Bush Architects. They've been doing work across sectors of practice, but most recently focused on the design of cruise terminals. You can see the Carnival Cruise Line terminal here in Miami on the screen at the moment. Again, a unique perspective on the role of practice in the academy. And maybe one of my more senior colleagues, Dr. Gray Reed, she is an associate professor of architectural history and theory, director of our MDes program, incredibly interested in climate and looking at ways of making our built environment hew more closely to what our natural environment would have it be, and tracking the history of its development. Our newest colleague is Kate Balug. She is a PhD from Harvard. She has a master's in urban design. She's our newest assistant professor in architectural history and theory. And the image on the screen is of a really wonderful initiative of hers called the Department of Play. It was a kind of extra official, ex officio department in the city of Boston's building department. It was intended to look at ways of engaging the public positively in urban public space. I'll just finish by saying that this is a recent photograph, and actually David Rifkind is still in this one. So that's before he went to become director of the architecture program at UF. It's in the years prior to COVID. Just as we take a photograph at the end of first year, this is the end of the very last year of our program. These guys have just finished thesis reviews and are ready to enter the profession. And you see us, you see them. This is what our profession will look like, I think. We are an incredibly diverse group that I think has the potential and the vision to make a real difference in the world. With the support of the profession and over the course of their lives, I hope that they will be working to make this a better world. And I will stop here, and if anyone has questions or anything they'd like to discuss, I'd be more than happy to take them. Thank you.
That's great, Marilise. As usual, you share so much. Your statistics always scare me, though I know them already anyway. But I'm always hoping things will change.
I will say that your practice, MC Harry and Associates, is one of the most diverse and one of the most progressive that I have encountered in my many years in this field. I'm also especially proud that so many of our alums are in your office. Thank you, thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, and we have several IPAL students now working with us. 3 IPAL, and we hired 2 of them. So yes, it is a great program, and I appreciate the level of interest that you always put in how do we promote diversity, how do we promote women in the profession, and I wanted to ask you maybe something I should have asked you many years ago. Besides the obvious, you're a minority. What kind of propelled you to sort of try to push more of this versus just teaching and off you go, and you know how sometimes we fall in our own little profession and don't realize that we need to do more to help the next generation. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
I guess. I mean, I'll tell you that I came to the profession as a sort of family disease, right? My dad was an architect
Yeah.
in Havana. It was a beautiful practice, and I'm sort of the lucky beneficiary of seeing what an architect's perspective on the world does. You know, being raised by an architect is an interesting experience. If you have children, they can probably read you chapter and verse of this, and anyone else on the screen who has that experience could probably speak to it. I don't know whether your collective children will decide to choose the profession, but it made a lot of sense to
One
me.
of mine did. One of mine did.
There you go.
My
There you go.
grandfather, what my grandmother, I'm like you, I'm, you know, family disease. They're either engineers or architects. My grandfather was both. So my 3 siblings are engineers. And I said, well, I don't want to be them. So I'm going to be an architect. My uncle was an architect. I had another cousin that studied architecture. And now my
Oh my
daughter is in
goodness.
architecture. And the boys are like, no, 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 no. I'm like, that's fine. That's fine. I don't
I
know
think
since Becky, if there's any chats or anything, because I can't see the chat since I'm outside of the school. And I don't know if there's any comments or questions on the chat. Sometimes I know people put stuff on the chat, and I
Sure,
don't know whether.
I don't
thank
see
you,
anything
Doris.
now,
Yeah,
at least
there is
here.
not, but if anybody wants to raise their hand or unmute themselves, this is a normal Zoom where not everybody's in listen only mode. So you can
Yeah.
participate or put anything in the chat.
Seriously, feel free. I can tell you that family vacations, we're always going to see cool new places and great new buildings, right? So this
Yep.
becomes part of what you grow up with. But you know, the thing of why not just teach and why not just practice, I'm happy to have been able to do both and to continue to do both, um, in ways that I find incredibly rewarding. You know, at some point, positions of leadership are ways to open the door for others. And, you know, having been on one side of a divide, the opportunity to make it easier for another person to get there has always seemed to me like something worth doing. And so that's been the reason, I think, for most of what I've done.
Well, and I have to say I appreciate that because I know for many years I knew I was one of very few, but I never really did anything about it until I kind of went to a conference and it was all about women, this leadership summit, and I was like, wait a minute, we need one of these in Miami, and now it's
Yeah.
become sort of my you know drum that I beat on a regular basis, and not only women but diversity, and as you know, obviously Craig, my business partner, is African American, so those numbers are just even worse than other numbers. Forget women. So that's kind of, I think it's very important that we share, right? That we share what this knowledge of numbers are, because as you say, you can't be what you don't see. You can't fix a problem you don't identify. So you and I have always been sort of beating that drum of we got to let people know about it. It's not about, to me, it's not about, you know, preaching to them and saying, oh, you're a bad person because you know you're not hiring this. It's not about understanding what the numbers are. If people don't know what the numbers are, they can't figure out that there's a problem.
Absolutely. And I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunity to work with you. And I think that what you do for our community is extraordinary. seriously, you are a role model for our students, and for our professional colleagues, as are several others whose pictures and names I'm seeing on the screen. I see
Well,
Nati
and you
Soto,
know
I
who's
see
teaching now?
Elizabeth
Nati.
Margo.
Nati's teaching at UM now. She's taken the Kool-Aid of education. So
There you go.
unfortunately, she wanted me to be in her jury today, but I'm not able to because I have another thing since seeing outside here. Becky, is there any comments or questions from the chat since you have access to it better than I do?
Sure, there have been a few comments. I think everyone's seen, but I will read them aloud for you. Carmela said this has been amazing. Thank you so much for the information. Very eye-opening. Barbara Hughes, I did not know this, just learned this. Her son is a structural engineer. So
Very
everybody
nice.
is drinking the Kool-Aid. And she did say thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
So is there other steps? You know, okay, you got the gold medal. Now what else can we get you to do for us, Marilise?
Well, I'll tell you, so much. It's I'm happy to do whatever you would like me to do. That's not an issue. But I don't know whether Women in Architecture does any kind of structured mentorship. But if there is, I know that you've actually been at the forefront of both trying to facilitate movement to fellowship, which is really important for all of our architecture profession, especially women, right? Because there aren't very many women fellows still in this day and age, and even fewer minority fellows, and Florida's numbers should go up. But if we can do those sort of facilitation things, so that entry level practitioners can feel comfortable moving to a middle level and then moving to a higher level, maybe that's something that Women in Architecture group can brainstorm how to best structure.
Well, I think you just added it to my things. Becky, please take note because I can't take note now. But I think you're right. A more structured, mentored program, because I'm obviously I see all the names of people that show and join these things, and some names I don't recognize, and I'm always excited. And I'm always excited when there's men there because we also need to make sure that the men are in the conversation. In fact, there's like 2 or 3 today. But I think that's a great idea to sort of create a more structured program, statewide, right? Because we can do it locally, but I think we need to share it. So now you've given me something else to do for our committee.
Just call me anytime, and I'm happy to help brainstorm with you. I think this is worth doing.
And I know people like Amanda Martin from Miami, and I know Joshua Shapskin from Florida, Gainesville. It's how do we engage the students? How do we ask an architect? How do we mentor it? So I think we need to certainly continue to collect our resources and then put it out there, right? And see what we get. It's the only way that people will see that becoming licensed is very important, and staying in the profession. It's not easy. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. It's still not easy. But some of us have a few more challenges on that road, and that lovely curve graph that you showed is really very telling. In a way that is impactful beyond the numbers, right? That the one that Equity by Design did. So that's very, really good. So Barbara had a question, and I saw the beginning. So Becky, the floor is yours.
Sure, this is from Barbara. How can we help curb the debt students graduate with?
Oof.
I think that's a great question. There aren't easy answers to this. If I'm wearing my administrator's hat at the university, I will say donate to those programs to support scholarships, right, which will make it less expensive for students to go to school. And so, the institutions give scholarships. AIA has been giving scholarships actually for range of students who've expressed need and even interest, right, in looking at the profession from particular ways, and that is AIA at the local level, at the state and regional level, and also at the national level, which I think is incredibly valuable. So making scholarship opportunities available for students, very important. Getting students interested in the research projects that my colleagues do, allow us to hire them as research assistants and as teaching assistants, which again goes to reducing their debt. The AXP program is differently structured in different places, but at FIU, students are eligible at the end of their third year, which means that they have 3.5 years of studies to do, and AXP essentially covers their tuition for all of that. Our partners like Lourdes's firm and many others pay students to work 20 hours a week during the academic year and 40 hours a week during the summer, and the money that they earn goes a long way again to mitigate against debt. So we are trying to grow that program so that more and more of our students can take advantage of those opportunities. And if the question is, how can the profession help? The profession can hire these young people. They can partner with us in IPAL. They can support through scholarships. They can support AIA so that there are scholarships to be given, or the programs in their neighborhoods. All of those things can help. If you teach at a public school, then the students in your school are probably paying less out of pocket than if you're teaching at a private school. But irrespective, most individuals need financial assistance to get across that finish line. So any way that you can support through the professional organizations, the academic organizations, or as a professional by opening the door to getting some of these brilliant young students in your offices, I think all of that can help. Elizabeth's already promised to reach out on the mentorship. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm counting on you for that.
Definitely. All right. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? Well, so again, Marilise, thank you so much for sharing how much you do for the profession. As I said, I gave you a blank slate, which is always the hard ones, but I'm glad you decided to share some of those numbers and statistics with us, because I think it's very important that we stay on top of that. And thank you for all you do. You don't give yourself enough credit. So that was very pleased when you got the gold medal, because you definitely deserved it. And I am very happy that you joined us. And, everybody I was always enjoyed what you tell us about. So thank you again for presenting and joining me. And you always say yes when I email you. You people have to learn how to say no when I ask something, right? Because you never know where I'm taking you, but you always go yes. So thank you very much for always saying yes before you even know what you said yes for. So
it's always a good experience. This is why I say yes. So thank you for taking this
no,
time.
thank you. Great, thank you. And our next one will be at the end of this month. We will be sending out some information soon. We're hoping that we will have Mickey Jacobs, Diane Jacob, who's probably the better half of the Jacob family, tell us a little bit about mentorship and leadership. So we'll be working on that. And anything else, Becky, you want to do a shameless plug for at the moment?
Yes, well, if you guys aren't signed up for Legislative Day, I hope to see you in Tallahassee on January 23rd. So
yes,
please keep reading your Friday's pack. So,
and if you can't go, but you want to help sponsor a student, by all means, I believe we can do that as well, right? Even if you cannot go, right? So
yes.
So I know FIU had a big contingency last year, which is great, and FAU. So FAU is obviously putting us to shame. So we all have to get all of our universities to send a whole bunch of students. So yes, definitely. If you can't go, but you want to help, that's one way to certainly continue to help the pipeline, right? Introduce them to what we do from the beginning by visiting our legislators. So again, see you guys all soon. And thank you. Thank you, Marilise, again. And
Thank you,
we'll
Alder.
see you. Great. Have a
Thank
great day,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.